All right, welcome once again to Social Distillation, the submarine still of the internet, where we attempt to drop the bead and pour white lightning straight on your brain, probably while yelling at each other this time.
I don't think it'll get to yelling, but
We found some more things we could disagree on and argue about. We will get back to Charles Murray at some point, but this book is rather thick, so I'm going to at some point talk about Coming Apart, which is the state of white America, because he got tired of being called a racist and said, you know what, I'm just going to take race out of it and I'm just going to look at white America. And then Sam's got his latest one,
facing
so we could
reality. Yeah.
kind of compare and contrast those numbers and what he's talking about. But first things first, we're going to talk about Simone Biles and the controversy and the uproar and the furor. This may become something that I was thinking we could open up with a news of the day kind of thing, which originally I didn't want to do, but I think we can and we should, especially when it touches on larger issues. I'm gonna paraphrase a couple of supposed quotes here. I say supposed because I've seen it variously attributed, but supposedly Churchill once said something to the effect of, small minds talk about people, good minds talk about events, and great minds talk about ideas. So I've tried to steer away as much as possible from, I've never really liked talking about people unless it's someone I genuinely loathe, like Woodrow Wilson. And I've tried to steer more towards the ideas, but people are people and we get caught up in events, and we should talk about that, especially when there's larger issues at stake. Specifically in this one, we're talking about mental health in general, but then also the few voices of dissent are talking about quitting and our societal mentality of giving up. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to talk about it too, because the other supposed quote, Patton supposedly once said, if everybody's thinking the same thing, then someone's not thinking.
Mhm.
And it's hard to find voices of disagreement when it comes to hot button issues like this, especially then when the usual suspects immediately throw race into it, just because Simone Biles happens to be a hot looking black woman.
Yeah. Uh, do you want? Why don't you give your opinion, since
Okay.
it's the more common one amongst your conservative peers, like Jason Whitlock and
Yeah,
who else was jumping on the boat?
yeah, I didn't even know about this because I usually I've always really liked the Olympics. And I tend to watch a lot of it. Um, but we've cut the cord, and so that has made it harder. Plus, I've just been busy. Plus, everything has become politicized, so I kind of lost interest. Whereas usually I like watching the Olympics, um, because of all the pageantry and we grew up, during the finale of the Cold War, so we were kind of influenced by that USA versus the Soviet Union stuff, which carried over a little bit even to the 92 Olympics with the first Russian Federation team and all that. um so I didn't even know this had happened until the waifu brought it to my attention and said, here's what's going on. And I said, okay, whatever. Um, and I've kind of unplugged from the from most of the kind of daily news podcasts and shows and commentary, just because I haven't been that interested. But I started watching Jason Whitlock mostly because he makes me laugh. Um, and so it's nice to have that visceral release when you're talking about this, what is so much nonsense. Plus, I've always liked his sports opinions.
I
So
will say
anyway,
he's usually hitting the nail on the head.
mhm,
I just think he was way out of line on this one.
right. So I sent the first episode where he talks about this. He basically talked about this all, at least a little bit, every show all week. Um, and you didn't even finish it because you thought his opening rant was way off, way offline,
Mhm.
and I, meanwhile, from what I know, I was cheering it and glad that someone was saying it, but also being frustrated because of the how come he gets to say things that we can't say because he has different melanin, but that's the world we live in.
Yeah, well, let's not go down that road on this one because
Yeah.
we want to keep it to precise here. So just give kind of a general overview of what he said and what you agreed with there, and then I'll jump in.
So the the first thing that he said that I agreed with, and I may be conflating a few things here between his first rant, which was really visceral, and then his subsequent shows because it all kind of runs together. Um, which was also my first thought is why is this being celebrated? Because yeah, if you if you really have to pull out of a sporting event, that's understandable. It happens. But then again, some of our greatest sports memories and sports history were made by people who struggled through adversity and then won. The obvious example is Kerry Strug from the whatever that was that the 98 Atlanta Olympics? I can't even remember. Or 96 Atlanta Olympics. Um, where she did a vault on, I don't remember if the ankle was broken, but I remember it required surgery afterwards. Um, and then the other side will say, well, yeah, but that ended her career, that whatever. But she was able to push through something, some serious physical adversity there and help her team win the gold and become an icon in the Olympic Games and also have that personal achievement of what she overcame. And that's the point of sport. That's why we we tend to push our kids. I mean, some of us do it because we're jerks living vicariously, but most of us, we push our kids to get into some kind of sport because they need to learn to overcome that adversity. They need to learn to keep going when it gets hard. Even if you have no chance of making it on the field, you're still getting value from showing up at practice and putting in the work. So that was my first takeaway, and one of his main points as well is that, and then the larger societal issue of we are a nation of wusses who, and I speak from painful experience here, quitting is like heroin. It is very easy to become addicted with the first hit, and it has disastrous consequences for you. Again, this is why we push ourselves and our kids to play sports in the first place. And this is why we celebrate sports in and why, we were so annoyed with Kaepernick, because sports are supposed to be this kind of unifying cultural event that espouses larger principles.
Well, yeah, I agree with you there that it is about the larger principles and perseverance and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I would like to separate true mental disorder from treat yourself
Mm-hmm.
and take care of me. And I think, and we ended up in a binary again, where one side is touting the take care of yourself and it's all about your own mental health and kind of going down that road, and the other side is you got to basically man up because this is the top of the sport, and if you're the best in the world you got to do this. But there's something in between, and that's that mental disorder is equally as bad as physical disorder when it comes to how it can cripple you. And we have a lot of different things going on with Simone that aren't being accounted for by the Whitlock side of the aisle. It's not just quitting, it's an actual crippling disorder. And we've got a lot of buckets we can pull from here. First of all, she's a female gymnast. And what do we know about low body fat percentage going through puberty is it messes you up, including your brain. So there's one bucket right there. She is an older gymnast. So she's reaching that age where we typically see these ladies addicted to their meds, whether it's pain relievers or antidepressants or any number of psychological meds. She has severe ADHD, And there's a controversy that she might not have been able to take enough of her medication because it's illegal in Tokyo. Now, there's conflicting stories on that.
Mhm.
And unless she comes out and says, no, they did not let me take my meds, then we're just going to have to say that's somewhere in between. But I know they allowed athletes to bring illegal meds, but it was limited. So she might not have been at the proper dosage. And so we know from what happens when you don't take your ADHD meds, you can't concentrate, right? And so we have that playing into it. So there's bucket number 2. She was part of the USA Gymnastics sex scandal.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah. So now we have another source of mental issues, psychological issues. Just think of at the high level gymnast, the physical abuse leading up to that moment, without the sex scandal. So we've got another bucket of abuse that is not healthy for these kids. So when we look at sports, and one of the things I try to do as a strength and conditioning coach is actually take my athletes outside of their sport for a second, because anything done to an excess becomes a form of harm. Whether it's playing year-round baseball and your shoulder can only take so many throws, or gymnastics is great for your body to a point, but these people are way past that point. And again, don't separate your mind and body. So there's bucket number 4. And bucket number 5 is the rule change. They changed the rules because she was too good.
I did not know that either.
Yeah, exactly. These are the things that aren't being talked about by that side of the aisle. So you take those first 4, which set you up for a breakdown, and then you put a person in a situation where they basically have to be more perfect than everybody else to excel.
What were the rule changes? Do you know the specifics?
Yes. So there's several parts of the scoring to gymnastics, and someone who watches gymnastics religiously could probably do a better job explaining, but I'll try to give the poor man's version. So you have your deductions from the judges, but that's all based on a difficulty score to begin with.
Right.
And that's a B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up. And she was doing things that other people couldn't do. So it would have given her floor would have been higher than other people's ceilings. And they changed it to where she was capped at a certain point based on what everybody else could do. So
communism.
The thing, equity, right? Equity. We've been led down this road again. So we're hit with the equity bug. This is what happens with equity, people.
Yeah.
And so basically, the things.
Hold on, I have a thought here. As we're explaining this, I think it's important to note that this is a distortion of what this scoring system is supposed to do, because I'm familiar with this scoring system. I don't remember when it came about, but I remember going, that's interesting, because anyone who's old enough to remember the the Cold War Olympics, and it was a running joke that if you were in the Soviet bloc, you gave the NATO Olympians, a score of 3 when everybody else is like 8, 9, 10, and you're like 3 because politics. And the system was designed to put as much objectivity as possible into something that's inherently subjective, judging someone's performance. So they have this across sports now. They do this in diving as well, is they certain movements have a degree of difficulty which gives you a base score, so that the subjective part of it is only how well you performed that movement. And now we have completely distorted that because equity.
Yeah. And so let me just one of the many stories on this here. Oops.
And I will say that I don't think it's fair to simply say that you're not getting it from my side, that side, because I will admit that what I know of the issue is all third party, except for I did watch the clip of when she told her team, I'm pulling out.
Yeah.
And it
so this is where I'm going to separate it from quitting, though. So we've
Mhm.
got all those first four things which set you up for a mental breakdown and poor performance, especially if she's not getting her meds, because you've got to be 100% dialed in to do the crazy things she
Yeah.
does,
Yeah.
right? And she was faltering. She was not herself out there, and so I'm thinking she's not on the proper
Mhm.
medication.
Yeah.
Uh, but then on top of that, they changed the rules, so you've been practicing this routine for 4 years. These gymnasts don't have a bag full of routines they come in with. They have the one they've been working on the
Uh-huh.
whole time. So she has this routine that has all these exceptionally difficult, dangerous routine elements in it that she's got to do because that's what she's been practicing, and it's not worth it. So she's lost focus. She's not getting scored for what she's doing, and it could kill you. So she pulled out. We would say, oh, the greats still would have stayed in and been
Mhm.
perfect and exposed the system or something like that. But now she's also got a team that she could inevitably hold back, because if you get deducted from that lower score,
Yeah.
you could be holding your team back, and you're not performing well because of all the other issues. She realistically could have helped her team by pulling up.
Yes.
Uh,
That was one of my first thoughts when I heard about it is, well, if you're doing this because you think you're a detriment to the team, um, but not knowing the scoring change, my own counter argument to that was, but she's the best person on her team, even if she's not 100% herself, she's still the best person on that team, or at least should be. But if your scoring has been hampered, well then,
yeah.
she isn't, because they've dropped her ceiling.
Well, and it's this system that we've come to accept. Put uh, a charitable reason behind a change, and everybody falls behind it. So they changed the rules to cap her out because they didn't want people that didn't have her ability trying these dangerous maneuvers, is how they
Mm-hmm.
said it. And so it's going to put other people's life or health at risk. And I'm like,
In a
that's what
sport that's
sports
all
are.
it, and in this sport particular, especially at this level, that's already inherently dangerous.
Mm-hmm. I
I
mean,
mean,
it would be like counting Tom Brady's touchdown passes for four instead of six, right? Because nobody else throws as many. Or if Mahomes does a no look pass and scores, oh well, that's not worth as much because other quarterbacks can't do that,
mhm.
and they might get hurt because they got blindsided or something. So it's it was a crappy rule change, and I guarantee it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't the, well, this is my conspiracy theory, is if it wasn't the US gymnast. We had this actually controversy. Was it, when was it in China? 2 Olympics ago, 3 Olympics ago?
Yeah, I think that was like 2008
And I
or
remember watching
12.
it the whole time because, first of all, there was a controversy with the underage girls that they
Hmm.
wouldn't show proof that they were actually 16.
Yeah.
Uh, and they were up there faltering, falling off the beam, doing all these things, and then getting these unreal high scores because the difficulty level was so high.
Uh-huh.
And nobody did anything about it then. Uh, and so I remember watching it back then, and the proper response shouldn't be, well, they need to cap their difficulty level. The proper response would be, why aren't our people doing that? Why aren't we trying the harder things so we can have a higher score? And then Simone Biles comes along and does it, and now she's being punished for it
Hmm.
in some sense. So you take all those other things that lead to mental disorder, true mental disorder, and then you add something like that to it. There's no surprise she had a mental breakdown.
Yeah.
And once you go down the true path of mental illness, it's not treat yourself. It's
Okay.
I can't function.
Well, and I will admit that in hindsight, that has been a lot of my reaction, because it's not just that's okay. So the few people that I've seen that are uh criticizing not just Biles, but then the reaction to her, the overwhelming reaction to her has been treat yourself.
Yeah,
And
and that I have a problem with as well, because it's lazy people using a true legitimate
Mhm.
issue to justify their own bad actions. So
It,
that I will speak against.
I'm still hesitant to be, kind of all in supporting her because I do feel like, and also her coaches, where was the coach to push her and say, are you sure you want to do this
Well, we
because
don't know they didn't,
XYZ? Yeah,
because
we
they did
don't
go
know
back
that
and talk for a while
that
before they came out
the
and made the
clip where
announcement.
she had I watched the whole clip of her vault, her bad vault, bad. I mean, it was still pretty darn good, but her bad vault and then her telling her team she was pulling out.
Mhm.
I mean, I didn't see anything there except her saying, "Okay, I'm done," and the way she did it. But then again, in hindsight, the
Well, her
vis
vault is one of those dangerous moves that they
yeah.
pulled down, and she again put her physical health on the line doing that vault for no reward. And because it wasn't perfect, she was going to get scored lower than if it had been rated at the proper difficulty level.
Mm-hmm. um but the emotional reaction to her saying, because of the way she did it, you would, your gut reaction is that's not someone who's one, in a bad headspace, which is what were her words, and two, she's being kind of flippant, and it doesn't really seem like she's doing this for her team. It seems like she's doing it for herself. But as I say that out loud, um that's kind of what people with mental disorders do, because you
Mm-hmm.
learn to cope in the same way that if you have some sort of physical problem, something I'm constantly fighting is my body's trying to compensate for my neck pain.
Mm-hmm.
So that causes one shoulder to kind of hunch up and round forward because of that pain. Your body is coping until that becomes normal. Well, your mind does the same thing. For instance, a lot of people were surprised to learn when Ryan Reynolds said that he had pretty severe anxiety and depression in high school and in his early adult years, to the extent that he went on medication. And you wouldn't think that from somebody who is a celebrity and an actor and who's always out there joking and being gregarious. But then it's likely that the joking gregarious was the act that
Mm-hmm.
helped him become an actor, because that was his coping mechanism.
Well, another more famous example that came to an extreme end would be Robin Williams.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, again, we're just talk mental disorder. No one saw that coming
Mhm.
because of his outward appearance. Maybe some family, even though in his the documentary about it, they claim they didn't see it coming either. But the same with this is actually a more mild response than why would you end it all? Why would you end your life? So now we get to the world stage. Why would you pull out? It's just another manifestation of a long history of kind of rolling down that hill of mental disorder. So this was just the breaking point.
Well, and I think we should rant about the treat yourself side, which has been all of the applauding of her for this hasn't been even remotely in depth. It has all been surface level, selfish individualism, which is
Yeah, then the message is important, and it should be mental disorder is an important thing to be discussed, and this is what can happen without help. And so if
mhm.
you truly have these things in your past that can lead to it, again, abuse, sexual abuse, abandonment, uh
The
just
physical abuse that, I mean, she put herself through.
yeah,
Uh,
probably substance abuse, the ADHD is probably worse since she's been medicated for so long since her childhood.
mhm.
So that becomes you end up just having to up the meds, up the meds, up the meds, up the meds. Uh, so all of these things that should be okay. We can have a discussion about mental disorder. Look at this person at the biggest stage in the world, broke down and couldn't take it anymore because of all these things. Then that's where the conversation should end. But we live in a country where people want to have a mental disorder. Oh, I'm so depressed. Oh, I have anxiety.
Because then you're a victim. You're
Yeah.
sympathetic.
Uh, kid wants to play outside. Oh, he's got ADHD. You Parents have this Munchausen's by proxy, with their kids now, instead of just saying, "Oh, I need to punish him," or "I
Mhm.
need to parent my child." No, let's just medicate them.
Well, I will disagree, though, that I still think that's not where the conversation should end, because there are no solutions, only trade-offs. And I do think a part of this conversation needs to be, um, but you still need to push yourself in the same way that, okay, yes, I have anxiety and I'm medicated for it, but I still need to push myself to try and talk to people sometimes, because otherwise you don't grow. Otherwise that coping mechanism just gets worse. And again, that was one of my first thoughts is, where are the coaches and the teammates pushing her?
Well, again, we don't know where this started.
We
This
don't know
could
where this
this could
started.
have been on the plane ride there. This could have been in
Yeah.
practice 2 years ago, where she's just like, I can't take this anymore. We could have had years of people pushing forward. And we're putting thoughts in people's mind when we make
Yeah.
assumptions about that. So we don't know where the point where she started doubting herself was.
No, but as part of a larger issue, and again, back to kids, younger people look up to these athletes and they try and emulate them, and 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 then through their life they carry those lessons, and one of those lessons need to uh be very careful of doing something that you will end up regretting the rest of your life.
Mhm.
So going back to Whitlock, I don't remember which episode this week he talked about this, but he gave the example of himself, that he did not play his last year of college football. He was a football player at Ball State, um, and he had good reason to, because he didn't like the coaches. He felt he had been mistreated. Um, the team doctor had misdiagnosed, I don't know how you do this, had misdiagnosed an ACL tear, and he played the previous season with a torn ACL. And then when he, in the off season, when he went back home, his doctor immediately diagnosed it, just looking at it, within a couple of minutes. So he was ticked off. And so he, at the time, he had good reason to quit the team and not play that last year. But he says he regrets it to this day that he did not play that last year. So there would
Well,
have been
and
mental and physical
years
strain.
years down the road, she may regret it too.
And so the trade-off here is, yeah, there would have been mental and physical strain for Whitlock to play through that at the time didn't seem worth it. But in hindsight, as he's gotten older, it was absolutely would have been worth it. And that's to me, that's the biggest failure of the treat yourself people who are applauding her, is there's absolutely no criticism allowed, or you're a terrible person. Well, no, we should ask the question, and we should hope that this is not something she ends up regretting the rest of her life. And other people need to think that through as well, as if you don't do this thing, whatever this thing is in your life, is it going to be worse in the long term for you?
I think I can have a good example if you give me just a second. All right, let me find. We got some images.
I'll try not to, while you're looking that up, I'll try not to go off on a rant about how this is why China is kicking our butts, and why the world is in danger of us becoming no longer a superpower and China becoming the lone superpower. Bunch of wusses. Get off my lawn.
I've got a great example right here. This is Josh Zeid. He pitches for Team Israel right now in the Olympics, and this is him from the I think the World Games, pitching for Israel. He came to me through a referral through one of my other clients. After 2 foot surgeries, he played in the majors and was dropped back down to the minors. His career was going downhill. He And his friend that referred him to me convinced him to take one more shot at it. And again, he was dropped down to the minors, not doing well, and everything was just going down, and his body was breaking down.
Mhm.
So we went through a general strength and conditioning program for the off season, and he went back, played another year in the minors, and then we did it again, and he ended up being recruited by Team Israel because they were allowed to recruit Americans who were first generation Jewish, and ended up having the best games of his life.
Yeah,
And
this was in the last World Baseball Classic, I
yeah,
believe,
World
right?
Baseball Classic, and he pitched lights out in that. I think he actually went a few games without even a hit.
Yeah.
Uh, and so now he just had another great outing for Israel in the Olympics, but he was ready to quit, and all
And
it took,
had good reason to.
yeah, he had great reason to. His feet were jacked up, which people that know, the physiology and the biomechanics, that just works its way up your body, so
Hmm.
everything hurt. He had no physical base.
And being in minor league baseball, from everyone I've ever heard talk about it, sucks. People think about the big contracts of the majors. You, the minors are not that.
Yeah. So again, there's a great example of the opposite. So someone who was ready to give up gave it one more shot, and now, shoot, we're 6 years later. He's he's still playing. So, and he'll never regret it. But he would have
Mhm.
probably. Uh, do we want to pivot?
Yeah, let's take a. I think the takeaway from that is, and I do admit I kind of fell a little bit victim to it myself, is the binary thinking and the politicization of everything.
Mm-hmm.
Of uh there's more to the issue, and if we're going to have a conversation about these issues like mental health, something that annoys me about the mental health people is when they say we don't talk enough about mental health. Okay, but you don't actually want to talk about it, you just want to throw the word around
Mm-hmm.
and then treat yourself. Okay, if we're going to talk about it, we need to actually talk about it.
Yeah, and I would take that a step further. There are people that benefit from the country being less healthy mentally.
Mm-hmm.
We're sliding down that road, and COVID
Oof.
actually made it quicker because of the isolation, but and the fear. I mean, fear. What is the album by Fear Factory? Fear is the mind slayer. It truly is. It has the
Yeah,
greatest effect of any emotion on your brain when it comes to structural changes. So
pretty sure they took that from Dune, but
yeah, wherever they got it from, it's true.
well, should I end us on a more extreme and depressing example?
If
Um,
it's too depressing,
well, it's about the
maybe I'll
Holocaust.
counter it. Oh, go ahead.
Well,
Why not? Let's go
I
balls deep.
I was just watching. Have mentioned them before, the World War II channel, and they do World War II week by week in real time as the events happen, and then they do specials every month or couple of weeks on basically what has happened in the Holocaust up to this point. And the point they've gotten to in 1942 is when the Holocaust as we know it starts. The factorized death camps of Treblinka, and there were three that were specifically built for mass extermination, and Treblinka was the biggest and the first. And they were talking about that, and they made a good point to show that this didn't happen in a vacuum. So this is the absolute extreme example that the Jewish populations, especially in Poland, were conditioned to be led like literal cattle to the slaughter. Okay, they had already been conditioned to follow the orders, follow the rules, and the SS went through the trouble of putting up signs to make them think that this is just a transitional camp, and you are required for health reasons to go through this decontamination, blah blah blah. Um, and this was all these were all steps that they had been through before, and each step was cruel and bad, but not so much that they couldn't push people to follow. They couldn't coerce people to, well, this is horrible, but it's better than not going along with this, until after every step, they were literally jammed into a gas chamber, was the ultimate conclusion of that. And I mean, that may seem extreme, but you brought up Robin Williams. It's the same thing that happens in a personal, individualized tragedy. He didn't suddenly decide to shoot himself, or I can't remember how he killed himself.
I think he hung himself.
Okay, he didn't suddenly decide to kill himself. There were steps along the way that seemed reasonable at the time until he pushed himself into a corner.
Well, and it's almost everybody goes, the common thing is, why would they do that? Well, they weren't thinking. Mm-hmm. They were reacting. Mm-hmm. They were reacting to something in their head that said, do this, because all hope is lost. And probably highly medicated or withdrawing from meds. So there's the two sides of that.
And they had been conditioned so that their vision had become so narrow that mm-hmm. they could not see any other possibilities. That, well, yeah, all hope is lost. Answer, no rebuttal. So I guess this is it. And there may have been doubt at the end, but it was too late. Mm-hmm. So if anybody, shoot, I'm trying to remember the name of that documentary on him. If you just look up Robin Williams on Netflix, documentary, and if you want to laugh and cry and laugh and cry and laugh and cry back to back for 2 hours, I recommend watching it. It's everything great about him and everything so sad and tragic about it. It's just back and forth. It's really well done. I don't have a happy thing to add to this. Well, okay, so we still had a gold medalist in the all around for the US. Okay. Yeah. So maybe she wasn't the best on the team at that time. I didn't know that because I wasn't paying attention.
Suni Lee everything or something like that.
No, I'll have to look up clips and results because I do like the Olympics and I miss enjoying them.
Oh, I was watching weightlifting yesterday, and it was the weight class that I would be in. It was like equivalent to 100.
Is it the Chinese women?
80 pounds. No, it was the males. And I'm like, this would be my weight class because I only have to cut like 5 pounds. And they were throwing up 460 pounds over their head in the clean and jerk, and 350 snatches. And I'm like, yeah, it would be my weight class if I was that badass. That
push yourself.
That's why I'm sitting in this chair right now, and they're over there.
All right. Well, let's take a short break, and then we will come back with something. Should we do sexy time, or should we get into the nonsense?
We should do sexy time, because sexy time. Do we want to do it on the same recording, or do you want me to stop and have a separate one?
Nah, I was just gonna pause so we can post the whole thing, and then I'll stop it because I want to post in clips.
Okay, cool. All right, we're back from our break, and now it's time for sexy time.
All right, and I should probably, so I stopped getting dirty looks from off screen, explain what I mean with sexy time with Sam. So this came about from an episode of Chatting with Candace, which we've referenced previously, and I actually think ties into what we were just talking about a little bit, because she has a podcast, and it's in my rotation. I don't listen to every episode, but she is a thoughtful and good interviewer, and she has a very interesting wide range of guests. But if there is one kind of recurring theme, she does talk a lot about mental health. And we were just talking about, if you're going to talk about it, if you say we need to talk about mental health, well, then talk about it. Because here you have a porn star turned podcaster who does more to actually talk about and have a conversation about mental health than so-called professional journalists. And I do think that ties directly into what we're talking about here, because your relationship and sexual health is part of your mental health. And what triggered this was listening to an episode she had with
Well,
someone.
let me add to that thought.
Okay.
Your mental health can, in the flip side, actually be a big trigger to relationship issues. So they both go back and forth. Your mental health can be based on the relationship, but also it can affect the relationship. So
Yeah, positive and negative. Yeah.
there's an interplay there. So okay, go back.
Well, the particular episode was with someone named Ayla, I think is how you
Isla,
pronounce
Isla.
Ayla.
Yeah.
Um, she's made
By
her
the way,
name
I
on
had to do some
OnlyFans.
research, and yeah, she's got some good work out there.
Um, they were talking about as you just derail me here, giggity. Um, uh, monogamy, polyamory, and what they call sex work, which I think that the term most people think of is prostitution, but it all they're talking about the whole range of working within the sexual industry, um, and what that means, and it kind of made me twitch a little bit, and I think you have some sources you're going to bring up. I was looking at a bunch of sources, and then I decided, you know what, that's not the direction I want this conversation to go anyway. Um,
But yeah, I
so
was uh, kind of wondering what direction you wanted this conversation to go, because
yeah,
I listened to that same episode, and I also listened to her being interviewed by Coleman Hughes. So
right.
it was a different bend on it. A lot of the same topics though. So what direction did you want to go with this? And then I'll go from there.
So um, I think that the first thing, the biggest thought I had, uh, we'll start by well, let me reference Chesterton. I think we've mentioned Chesterton's fence before, um, when we were talking about the difference between the liberal and conservative mind, big L, big C,
Mhm.
and the way Chesterton said it is the difference between a conservative and a liberal is a liberal sees a fence and he wants to tear it down. A conservative sees a fence and wonders why it's there. Now, Chesterton is kind of hilariously snarky, if you like subtle and dry humor. Um, but where he's wrong philosophically is that sometimes you do need to tear down that fence,
Mhm.
which, as we've said in our earliest episodes, that's why you need both minds. That's why
Well, I
we
think
need to
the other
stop
the
segregating ourselves.
continuation of that was you must first ask why the fence is there before you tear it down.
Mhm.
So if you don't ask why the fence is there, then don't tear it down.
Right. And that was my biggest problem right off the bat with what they were talking about is hold on a second, hold on a second. There's a reason that these traditional family values, all these annoying buzzwords that short circuit conversation, but there's a reason that traditional values around sex and marriage have existed, and it's not just the oppressive white Christian patriarchy. You can obviously you find differences through different cultures, but for the most part, there are a lot of commonalities when it comes to sex and marriage throughout the whole of human history. And people will bring up, well, multiple wives and concubines, and yeah, that's not reality though.
Oh,
The the people who had uh multiple wives, they had the power, and the money and the social capital to do that. For most people, that's not how life worked. Okay? Yes, if you have the money to have a whole harem of wives and concubines, you're going to do that because, as I said previously, men are basically the male lion. With no other constraints on us, all we would do is eat and sleep and screw. Okay. So if you have the money to do that, if you have the power to impose that, and if you're at a high enough social status that you get exempted from the normal rules and norms that the plebes follow.
well, yes and no. This is why I didn't know which direction we were going to go down. Do we
Mhm.
want go down the evolutionary biology route, or did we want to go around down the cultural route?
Well, let's
And
start with the cultural, because the biggest the biggest cultural norm to me, and this is why one of the reasons I stopped looking for sources, is because, so if I'm writing a history paper and I say the American Revolution of 1776, I don't have to cite a source for that. It's known.
mm,
Well, the the problem of lack of fathers on society, and the sociological data on that is basically that at this point. It is, yeah, people still argue about causes and solutions, but the data is there and irrefutable and unarguable that one of, if not the, as Charles Murray said in that, was it the Hughes or the Lowry, the Hughes, Coleman Hughes podcast, the number one indicator that he can use to predict someone's success over a whole variety of factors is whether or not they have a father in their life, whether or not they
mm,
were raised with the father. And it goes further than that, because I've seen a number of people cite data and sources that you don't even have to have a good parent. You just have to have two parents. You just have to have a mother and a father, and that is going to guarantee you the most success in life. And that is why that fence is there, because the core of civilization is the nuclear family, because that is what raises the best next generation. It gives you the most likely success for the next generation.
well, and this is where there might be a point of disagreement. You can be a father to your child without being in the nuclear family.
The data doesn't support that, though.
Well, no, no, the data is clouded because most people that leave the family aren't fathers to their children. They're part-time fathers. So it's about the influence versus the I do's forever.
Well, but that's the reason there's I do's forever, because it is not the reason that um uh divorced and separated fathers become part-time fathers is because just practically speaking, it's nigh impossible to be a full-time father if you're not there.
Uh, yeah, well, this is where cooperation between the divorcees comes in too. So uh, obviously, and I think by now the audience knows I did not have a good father experience up until I was. When did Mom and Tommy get together? I was 35 when the first real father came in. So that doesn't count. I don't think. My prefrontal cortex was already developed.
Yeah.
But the father figure, if you have cooperation between two separated parents, can actually be better than if these two people stayed together and were hating each other for it. Does that make sense?
Anecdotally, yes, but again, from the data I've seen from people like Murray, um eh,
Again,
barring
the data is
abuse.
skewed because most separations don't have that cooperation.
Right,
Because people get together, have a kid, hate each other, leave, and fight the whole time.
but that's what I'm saying, is the nature of that separation makes it nigh impossible. Yes, theoretically, if you had uh, a high degree of cooperation between the parents,
Mhm,
you could have a separation that had little to no impact on the child or children.
mhm.
What I'm saying is that's just not feasible in reality, from what we know of human nature and from what we see in society. That's just not going to happen.
Well, and
Again,
it's not feasible because of human nature for go ahead, go ahead.
well,
I got a
what
bigger
I'm
thought
trying to
that's coming up.
establish here is this is why this fence exists. Okay, monogamy and marriage aren't just the evil colonial Christian white patriarchy that the nonsense critical theorists would ascribe to it. No, it, first of all, again, I going back to my male lion analogy, you have to cage us, okay? Because our nature as males does not lend itself to that restrictive relationship. But we thrive in it if we are forced to, because then our our conquering nature is turned into a protective and leading nature, if that makes sense.
Oh, it makes perfect sense. It doesn't. I don't agree with you. You have to cage me, though. Uh, in fact, I think the biggest difference we're going to have over this whole conversation is the conservative tendency to treat each other like possessions, and versus we are free and autonomous, but we still choose to do the right thing. So there's a big difference there. And I think when we're talking the marriage lock, you're creating a legal system to lock somebody into this role as protector of the family and father to the child, whereas a good man will still raise their child.
Well, yeah, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole because the legal part of it annoys the crap out of me.
Well, yeah, we already
Um,
had that discussion where
yeah.
but I mean, legal in a sense of there is an outside factor, whether it's your
Mhm.
religious base, whether it's the government, whether it's some ceremony that
Well,
locks you into.
and in the past there was a you didn't need much in the way of legal because there was so much societal pressure
Mhm.
to take care of your family. That as a man you care for your family and your children. That is that legal pressure just wasn't needed. But I thought of an analogy about the caging of men so that um, our nature gets directed towards more positive outcomes. Sports. You look at I want to say it's 90, maybe it's 80%. It's a ridiculously high number of people in prison are male because
It is around 90 something percent. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So and young men, that's who are arrested, young
Mm-hmm.
men, because men are naturally more aggressive. Well, a positive outlet for that is sport, and sport has
Well, another
rules.
positive outlet for that is sex, but
Sex also has rules. So,
yes.
some of them literal and written, some of them unwritten and societal,
Mm.
but that also has rules. So people in general need rules. Now we also need. I keep meaning to get Peterson's new book because we need both. But that's the whole point of his 12 rules for life is you need to establish these rules for yourself so that you can focus your energies on productive ends.
I do
So
like
if
the paradox, the 12 rules, the antidote to order. You're
mhm,
creating rules to
mhm,
combat order. But
yeah, yeah, have you
continue.
got it yet? Or
Yeah, I have it. It's up. I haven't read it yet though.
okay, okay,
Yeah.
yeah, it's on my to-do list. The point being that I mean, I to an extent I do want to debate the merits or demerits of it, but for the point of right now, my main point is kind of contrary to there was no contrary voice with Candace and Isla talking about uh monogamy and sexual mores. There was no contrary voice, and my point was, well, actually, no. There is a reason these fences exist. There's and have existed pretty much through all of human history, wherever you go. To I mean, some of the lanes are wider, some of them are narrower, but all of them have roughly similar lanes.
Well, and culturally, we develop our tendencies around how we are biologically. And the great thing about humans, and everybody wants says, what's special about humans when it comes to sex? Is it the female orgasm? Nope, nope. Other primates have that as well. Is it sexual fantasy? Well, we see that in other primates as well. Is it all this list of things that you can say, is this what makes us special? And what actually makes us special is we're all of it. We're all of it. Some species have this, some species have that, some species have the other. but we have everything when it comes to sexuality. Are we a tournament species or are we a pair bonding species? Well, we're both. And we could probably draw a nice little bell curve for society. And if you're extreme on the pair bonding, you will never ever even think about anybody but your partner. If you're extreme on the tournament, you will never ever think of having a partner. You're just going to be like some athletes I know and just keep having a new partner every night. 17 and 20 days was the worst that I had seen. But Wilt Chamberlain, right? What is it?
Yeah.
Several
Yeah.
thousand. He says he had, if he's correct. So he's probably extreme on the tail of the I can't be a pair bonded. I'm a tournament person. So and most of us are somewhere in between where we have tendencies to both sides, and society kind of helps us live. So societal norms help us live together with those tendencies. So I actually do agree that we do need some limit on that. Otherwise, we would just have those tournament the extremes dominating or messing up everything. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, because we are somewhere in the middle, maybe we need to look at things a little differently than that rigid cage that you're talking about.
Well, maybe, and again, this is kind of the secondary point that was my reaction to their conversation was, hold on a second. You're saying, these outdated traditional things, and there's nothing wrong with the way we've lived our lives. Well, maybe there's nothing wrong for you, but I think it's fair to say, from just anecdote, supposition, and data, that for most people that wouldn't be the case. For most people, you don't want to throw out these rules. Now, we can say that we should perhaps be more accepting of people who don't fit into that tradition. And this is where I was going to bring up some of the gender identity as I see it nonsense, that I actually got to looking into some of these definitions. And I have a fair degree of sympathy for people who, not the people pushing it, but the people accepting this concept of gender and slash sexual identity, because it's kind of merged now. To a certain degree, more language is better because we have more ways of expressing ourselves and we can be more precise. And it is true that it is nice to have something of a shorthand to describe yourself and kind of where you fit. So a big part of the gender identity is looking at masculine, feminine as a kind of spectrum. And so where do I fit in that spectrum? I can sympathize with that. And I mean, when we were growing up, it was a big thing that you know, uh men and boys needed to show their feelings. It was okay to cry. It was okay to talk about your feelings. And so you didn't have to be masculine. You didn't have to be, John Wayne all the time. And that's useful. That's helpful. But we didn't do that by destroying the very idea of masculine and feminism. And that's where I think the gender identity goes too far, is that, okay, yes, it's okay to describe yourself as, a woman who tends to be more masculine in the way you act, the way you think, the way you dress, whatever. But that doesn't mean you're not a woman. That doesn't mean you're a whole new unique thing. It doesn't mean you're a unique person.
Well,
I don't know how much of a tangent that was, but in my mind, it made sense.
It's a very big tangent. Now, what we do know, and I'll just go down the biological route here, is with truly transgender people, and this is actually where I want the conversation to go in the mainstream, because to me, it doesn't make sense that it's not the mainstream conversation, is there are parts of the brain that we can look at that if it's structured a certain way, that person is technically a female in a male body because they have a female brain. and the nuclei of the hypothalamus, for instance, is small in a transgender male or female that is a male trans
See, this is what I mean about the language has become. I understand what you were trying to do, but you've made a mess of it because we don't even know how to say which. How does this?
So the whole transgender debate. What is this? I'm a female in a male body, or I'm a male in a female body.
Mhm.
We can do a freaking brain scan and say, well, yeah, you're probably correct. Or or we can look at it and say, give it time. You might just be gay. So we can do a brain scan and know that there's a probability.
Yeah,
There's a
which is
probability spectrum.
and there's a reason for that. I don't know if you were still watching Dave Rubin when he mentioned this, but he said a few times a couple of years ago when the transgender debate was really first getting going, is that he would be terrified to be a child living now because when he was growing up and coming to terms with his own sexuality, then he eventually realized I'm gay, and he's worried now that, well, okay, but what if some of those more feminine things that made me realize I was gay now, would someone just say, oh, well, you're a woman trapped in a man's body, and and then that's that. But he grew as a person, he had experiences, and he came to realize this is who I am. And now he's a married middle-aged guy with a kid.
uh, well, yeah, we can go down all kinds of rabbit holes with this, because you look at the big five personality traits. About 60% of it is attributed to genetics, per all the studies, and about 40% to development. Uh, and if you look at my profile, I'm a chick. I'm highest in openness, and then agreeableness, and then eroticism,
I
which
don't
is a
remember.
typical female profile.
Uh-huh.
And so if we did a psychological test on me as a child, they'd be like, oh, you're a girl. But I'm an adult male, straight as can be. I just am very open and agreeable. Whatever, right? So all of these things, we can say give it time. But again, back to my point, we can look at the actual brain itself and how it's going to release neurotransmitters and chemicals and say, wow, okay, this person does have a quote unquote female brain. Does that make sense? But I still think we shouldn't be doing that in children. We should be waiting till they're at least.
But bringing it back around to what we're theoretically talking about here, when it comes to sexuality and the widening expanse of what that means and what is, well, I was going to say permissible, but I mean, we should be, and this I can agree with them on, that we should be in a society where pretty much anything between consenting adults is permissible, because either we live free as autonomous individuals or we don't. And that means you're going to have to accept things that you personally don't like we argued about with our abortion debate. And I mentioned with the one of the big failings of the conservative movement, especially in the 90s, was the failure to accept and become proponents of civil unions. That, yeah, maybe you personally don't like that because you think these people are living in sin or whatever. Okay, but we are a free society and you have to be able to accept, because maybe they don't like the fact that you're a Bible thumping Christian.
Yeah,
but they have to live with
and
it.
Realistically, the only reason that even has a place, any of it, is we got to talk about heritability of your assets. And
yeah, that's where the court cases all stemmed from, is the massive intrusion of law and regulation into pretty much every facet of our lives. And then so then you do have a say in what I do. You do have a legal right to be a Karen, as we say now, because you have a financial stake in it. That's bad. So in that sense, I can agree that, okay, there should be there definitely should be a relaxing of the legal and regulatory framework of these traditional things, but be very careful about tearing down that fence. Be very careful about saying, hey, let your freak flag fly and do what you want. Because this was another thing they talked about they're kind of offended and confused by people who feel that sex work is degrading. Well, no, I think for a lot of people it would be, from the simple fact that there aren't a lot of nudists out there. Okay, little hiccup there to take care of the dogs so that they weren't drowning out whatever nonsense we were babbling about. But let me wrap up my point here about sex work being degrading. Is that so? I don't know if it's still up on Netflix, but there's a Netflix documentary that I couldn't make it very far through because it was so dang depressing. Depressing as a man who likes to think he is a gentleman, and depressing as a father, called Hot Girls Wanted. And it followed some young girls that were in their early 20s, late teens, who were, I don't want to say coerced because that denotes a degree of force, but they were talked into, they answered ads and they were talked into doing porn by some really sleazy douchey guys, and they absolutely regretted it. And that was my reflexive thought when the conversation with chatting with Candace turned to, well, sex work isn't degrading. There's nothing wrong with this. Well, maybe for you there's not, but I think for the overwhelming majority of women, it would absolutely be degrading. In the same way that
Well, my only counterpoint to that would be, then don't do it.
but that was where I thought that the conversation needed some deeper thought or a contrary voice, is that it's not degrading for us, and here's why. And I think they did an okay job of explaining the here's why, but I do think it needs to have that, that finer point of for us. And again, just maybe speaking out of turn here, but maybe it doesn't work for you. Maybe you're doing a post hoc rationalization, because we all do that for ourselves.
Could be, and it could be the other way around with those other girls too.
But again, this is why. Well, I think it's harder to do a. I think it's harder to do a post hoc rationalization going the other direction. You can see that in there were some other documentaries on Netflix that I think are still up, called Life After Porn, were a little more salacious. And you do see that with some of these porn stars turn Christian evangelists, that there is, at the time, they were perfectly happy to do this work, and now they're rationalizing in reverse of this is why it was bad. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong.
Well,
Just
because
their minds
also
have
remember the
changed.
voices that are going to be in their ear after they've done it. I can't believe you did that. I can't. Why did you do that?
Yeah,
That was so degrading. Like the term you just used, that was so
yeah,
degrading. And now they're starting to say, yeah, it was. I can't believe I did that. I regret it, because of the backlash they're getting. They're regretting the backlash. They're not regretting doing it. In the moment, they were consenting adults. They're only regretting it because of what the pressure is post event.
okay. What's wrong with that?
What's wrong with that is, did they really regret it on their own accord, or are they regretting it because of the backlash from it? Which is where society comes in, because society's pressuring them to regret it.
Yeah, but again, what's wrong with that? In the same way that I said earlier that it was good when we didn't have all the laws and regulations, and society pressured you as a man to do your job as a husband and a father. We need societal pressure. Societal pressure can be a good thing, to uh, uh, keep us within the boundaries of both personal and cultural ethics.
Yeah, but you look back at the people you were talking about.
Mhm.
They did this thing. I'm not gonna let's make a hypothetical. They didn't get an STD, they didn't have a child. Why are we berating them for what they did in the past? No harm, no foul. You did something, you said it's not for me, you didn't do it anymore. But at the same time, to say I regretted that is different. To say, oh, I can't believe I did that, I was pressured into that, is completely different than saying, well, not for me. I tried it, did it, move on. Going forward, I'm not going to do it anymore.
Because that kind of lackadaisical attitude would encourage others to do it.
But it might be right for them.
But it probably isn't, based on what we just talked about bell curves.
Yeah, spectrum.
It's probably
spectrum.
not.
So everything's on the spectrum. And unless you are open to explore these things, you don't know where you are on the spectrum.
But I'm not open to exploring heroin because just trying it that one time could kill me. There are certain things you can't take back. You don't want to try them. You might want to think about them, but you don't want to try them because you can't take it back.
Are we comparing sex to heroin?
Yes. It's
I mean,
highly addictive.
it is highly addictive, yes, but it is not going to have the same effects on your body, especially if you are safe about it.
No, again, it's an extreme example, and
which is a logical fallacy, by the way.
No, it's not.
It is using an extreme.
It can be a logical fallacy. It is not inherently a logical fallacy.
It is in this situation.
No, it's not, because I was about to get to that. So from what I remember of what I watched of Hot Girls Wanted, the biggest regret for all of them is that it's out there now. I mean, especially in this day and age. Maybe, if back in the days of VHS where the copies could get lost or destroyed, it's not as big a deal. But okay, now these girls having hardcore sex on film is out there forever for anyone to see, purposefully or accidentally. And that's one of their, if not the biggest regret about it, is that it wasn't just well, I tried this and it wasn't for me in the privacy of my own home. I tried this and it wasn't for me, and it's never going to go away.
Well, this goes back to our Biles conversation. You're making a huge decision. Are you going to regret it later? That should be the message we tell everybody in every situation. They made a decision, they regret it later.
What you're saying is that since this is sex and it's not a big deal, they shouldn't regret it.
I didn't say it wasn't a big deal. I'm saying society is pushing them to regret it.
And I'm saying society is right to do that.
Exactly, which is back to the point. So
because for most people, they will end up regretting it.
So back to the Biles situation. If she regrets this 20 years from now, it should be her own regret, not people saying, oh, you should never have quit. It shouldn't be society pressuring her to regret it. It should be her saying, God, I had a little bit more, I should have done it. And that's her own mental space.
Yes and no.
By the way, for the audience, I do think societal pressure does have some place. I think we just go over the top with this certain topic.
Yeah. So we're talking about sex here. For the societal pressure of how a man should treat a woman, that's a very good thing, and it's become annoyingly distorted with how we've redefined sexual assault to basically be regret on the day after. That's stupid, and it distorts what should be positive societal pressure, which is, hey, you dude, focus that biological sexual energy into being a gentleman, not a douche. Okay, so that's good. That is good societal pressure, and that's where I say yes and no to your Biles example of, yes, I agree with you in that we should absolutely have sympathy and understanding for someone in her position. But that doesn't mean we just give her a pat on the back and say, okay. No, if you did something that you regret, you need reminding of it for two reasons. First of all, because personally, you need to remember that so that you can try and avoid doing it again. It's why, you know, you don't want to be like me and obsess on everything you regret and bad thing you've ever done in your life to the point where it paralyzes your decision making and your brain. No, you don't want to do that. But on the other hand, if you completely forget about it, then you never learn about it and you just do it again.
Well, that's where
Um,
we agree, but at the same time, I think we're muddying the waters with what should be regretted. You know, and where that regret comes from. So again, yeah, we need to get back on topic on the sex work in
mhm.
general. And
But yeah,
and
yeah. I think kind of like our abortion discussion, I think we can agree on the broader idea that
mhm.
yeah, societal pressure can be good, and there should be things that you regret because
Well,
there are things that you as an individual shouldn't do, and if you do them, you need to remember that that regret, that feeling, to keep yourself from doing not just that thing but something like it
well,
again, so
anything
you don't
that
have
is
to
a
go through
feeling
that.
from your own mind is evolutionary to some degree. Disgust, we would smell something and it was horrible and we don't eat it because it was probably bad for us. Fear, you get that sense of fear so you can run from the lion. All of these things have their place, and regret is one of them because you did something, it did not have a good outcome, and you regret it later so you don't do it again. So that's where we agree. It's what's causing the regret. Is it because of societal norms? Or is it because I actually hate the fact that I did something because it had a negative effect on me personally? Not my status in society, but personally. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, I see where you're coming from there. I think part of the reason the waters get muddied here is because what we're talking about specifically, as you say, bringing it back to sex work specifically, that is in the public sphere. That is a
Mm-hmm.
social action because you have done something that is now on the interwebs forever. Um, so
Own it.
there's see again, that's that lackadaisical averages that's going to encourage people to do it, and I don't think it's healthy for the overwhelming majority of people.
Well, own it isn't, I'm proud of this. Own it
Mm,
is,
okay, that's
yeah,
a good point.
yeah. Own it is, I did this. I'm not going to do it again, but it's there. I mean, just honesty is a big part of this. Being honest with yourself, but being honest with everybody else. Someone says, "Oh, I saw you in this video." It's like, yeah, I wouldn't ever make that choice again, knowing what I know now. You know, I don't like that it's out there, but it's there, and I can't do anything about it.
Let me make my point this way, perhaps that um, you could be right in that there is a degree of too much societal pressure, but I think in this case, um, because of our biological urges and the relative ease and availability of sex, that we need that societal pressure to keep us from overindulging. That there has to be some degree of societal pressure on this, on, and we can chicken and egg it all day about does the regret come from the societal pressure or is the societal pressure reinforcing the regret? To a certain degree, I don't think it matters so long as it's there to a healthy enough degree to be useful both on the individual and the societal level.
Well, we could go down. We should probably go down the road of what's different now versus how we developed. Because when we talk about sexuality, especially in monogamy versus polyamory, uh, there's a lot of things that are different now versus when the rules were made back in the day, right? So one of the things is you talk about Just basically falling in love, right? Finding that person that matches enough of your likes, enough of your wants, that you get that chemical response that says, I really want to be with this person. Well, one of the main differences we have now is availability. Whereas, 1,000 years ago, you knew the people in your village, and one or two people might match those criteria for you, and that's it. But now you can open your phone, get
Mhm,
on an app, and find 3 dozen people within 20 miles. Does that make sense?
mhm.
So availability has changed everything. Birth control. Now we don't have to worry about procreating and having to father all of these different children because, well, we can stop that. Uh, what else is different?
The Model T. I so uh I first heard this from Jonah Goldberg. I don't know if he got it from somewhere else, that he's made the criticism that he doesn't know why uh conservatives have in the past fixated on birth control as the cause of the sexual revolution. And he points out that uh, even before that, you had the explosion of the automobile industry in the United States. So now you have a place where courting couples can go to get out of the house. Just again, back to availability.
By the
That had a
way,
big thing to do with it.
the Toyota Tundra has the biggest back seats.
Noted for future reference.
Hotel Crew Max right there. Uh,
Well, I feel like you're making my point with the availability, though, is that with the availability, I feel like that societal pressure needs to be even greater so that you can be pickier.
well, let's look at the different ways males and females handle certain hormonal things like
Mm,
jealousy, for instance.
mm.
So why do males harbor jealousy? What's the main biological reason we get jealous?
Well, if you're talking just on that route, then I would say it is the competition of spreading our seed.
Indirectly, yes. It's the fact that we can't know it's our child,
Mm,
right? So if I procreate with a female and she has multiple partners, I don't know if that child that popped out of her is mine. There are actually cultures around the world where they call it the sister son, where the man is more likely to take care of his sister's son than his own child because he knows that his sister's son is his own genes, because he knows where the baby came from, which is his sister. So I can't know that it's my sperm that created that child, so I'm going to be possessive over this female. So to make sure that it is mine. So that's where male jealousy comes from. Where does female jealousy come from?
that's
He's
a more interesting point because, and you can see this in the in sexual excitement. So males overwhelmingly will watch porn. Women will watch it too, but and
especially conservative males.
um you I don't want to go down that rabbit hole. They talked about that too, but that is whatever. Um, I feel like having to argue that no, I'm not sexually repressed is the same as having to argue that I'm not a racist. But I digress. Um, there is now kind of an industry for porn for women, and it's different in the same way that the trashy novel, the trashy romance novel with Fabio on the front, that was a female thing because that's how they get sexually excited. Versus we would look at that and go, "This is boring and dumb. Why am I reading this?"
Well, female jealousy then comes from their biological investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm going to put myself in a situation where I'm going to be carrying a child for 9.5, almost 10 months, and having to nurture this child after that, I want to make sure that I am not going to be abandoned in the process.
I do think, and this is I think there is an element of that I've thought of before, when it comes to the difference in male and female jealousy. And I'm probably an evil patriarch for thinking this, but there is a difference in the sex act itself between men and women that I think makes a difference. For us, it is a completely external act. So I do think that makes a difference. I mean, uh, that's why rape is a violation, um, because you are having your body violated, invaded, right? So I also think that's why women are more forgiving of infidelity if it was just sex, because to them the sex act is more physically intimate, as well as from their biochemical makeup is more emotionally intimate. And so long as there is not that intimacy of a relationship, they are more forgiving of infidelity. Whereas men get pissed off and we want to fight.
Yeah, there is that. It, I think this is where the psychological profiles come in too, uh, because yes, in general, men are this way, and in general, females are this way. But there is something to be said about having an intimate component, even for the man. But again, that's where the bell curve comes in.
Mhm.
Where are you on that bell curve? If you're
Right.
extreme to one end on the tournament style, then there's almost no emotion with it. You just
Yeah.
want to fuck, right? And you do, and 20 minutes later you're horny again. Whereas on the other extreme other end, it almost, you don't even have to have the act. You can just cuddle, right? As long as you're getting that pair bonding experience. So it's, again, most of us are in the middle.
Right.
Uh,
But even if you're more towards the feminine end of that, I would say it's still going to be the way that intimate connection is established, and how it feels for the man is going to be different. Um, and I uh
which
I
actually
do.
would explain why so many men are bad at sex, by the way, because they're not
That's
even
actually a good
paying
point.
attention to
That's a good
their
point.
partner. They're just trying to hammer home and be done. Uh,
Well, and I think this circles back to, again, why I'm saying for most people, this kind of let your freak flag fly and, oh well, if it didn't work, fine, doesn't fly for most people, is because, so first of all, when it comes to the regret, is for a lot of people there's going to be a barrier to intimacy if you know that your partner has had many partners before you. uh it's just, it's going to be there. From the male side, from the male macho side, we're going to be worried if we measured up. We're going to be possessive, literally and figuratively. We're going to be possessive, so that's going to create a barrier. And for the woman, you're going to have that. Well, does he really love me? Is he really intimate with me, or am I just, you know, even if we've been together for years, there's still going to be that thought of, I'm just one of many. So in that sense, I think be careful. Be careful what you do with yourself, because these are the reasons you could end up seriously regretting it. And I had a second point, and I don't remember what it is. So
uh, yeah, well, I want to take what you're saying, and yeah, you're right. They should have had another voice
mhm.
in that conversation. But where they were right is, this is right for me. And I think what societal pressure has done is make it uncomfortable for anybody to explore whether it's right for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but then I go back to my extreme example of, there's a reason for that, because you better be darn sure that you want to try this, because this is something you don't take
But
back.
it goes beyond that. It's become a shaming experience. You know, people who are swingers hide the fact that they're swingers, and they go into these societies underground to do what they do, right?
Well, this may be a big part of where I'm coming from. Actually, that's an interesting thing to bring up, because I feel like a big part of this public shaming is the fact that sex is so public in the first place. Let your feet flag fly, but I don't need to know about it. I don't care. I mean, I care. I care in the sense that I've been talking about. I care if you're someone I know personally, and you want to or need to discuss these things. But if you're a total stranger, I don't care. Um,
Yeah,
and,
but
and
if there was if it wasn't a big part of our society, there wouldn't be an industry for it.
okay, but
A billion,
okay,
multiple billion
let me
dollar
talk.
industry.
Let me talk about specifically about what we're talking about here. Is that okay? These two women who have engaged in acts of public nudity and sex are talking about the societal view of that. Well, you invited us to have a societal view by putting it out there publicly, in the same way that uh, the pro gay marriage crowd said, well, what do you care if I'm married? Well, you're making it a public policy issue. You're making me care. You're inviting
Well,
my commentary on it.
except that they had to actually get the rights they needed to have that inheritability with their partner, because it's a legal thing. If it wasn't a legal thing, which I think we agree on that it
Yeah.
shouldn't have been, uh, if it wasn't a legal thing, they wouldn't have it. And this is actually where I disagreed with Isla, because she said the polyamorous movement now is going to be like the gay rights movement was, and I disagree because there's no legal aspect to it. It now polygamy, yes, because you're actually so okay. We need to
That's a good point. That's a good
we
point.
need definitions here.
Yeah.
Open relationship means you can have sex with whoever we want. Polyamorous means you can have relationships with multiple people, and polygamy is where you're actually legally marrying these multiple people. So there's the difference there. Now, polygamy would be a different movement because now you're talking about legal rights, whereas the gay rights movement was about legal rights. Now, as far as an acceptance movement, it's really polyamory really should stop with get over yourself. Some people live life differently.
Well, here's where I think she's right, but that's because I think I'm more pessimistic than you. Is that I disagree with you that the gay rights movement was about legal equal rights. I think that was the facade of the gay rights movement, and I think you see
No,
that
it wasn't the facade. It was the genuine part of the gay rights movement. There were
it,
piggybacks
it was the
on that.
facade for the leaders of the movement. If you read them in their own words, or if you listen to them in their own words, in the same way that uh, uh, Texas is trying to pass an anti-critical theory bill, and it's being said that oh, this is they're trying to ban they're trying to ban teaching about the KKK. No, we're not. And you've commented on this on the memes of, oh, if it weren't for critical theory, I wouldn't know about. That's not what critical theory is,
Oh,
right?
there's a
So,
new one I got to comment on too. But
but
that's a whole nother.
right,
I'm just
right.
going to collect those memes, and then we'll just have a whole discussion based on those memes.
Whether you think that the legal movement for gay marriage, gay rights was legitimate or not is irrelevant. The point is the movement was absolutely used, whether you think it was hijacked or purposely intent, again, irrelevant, was absolutely used to attack uh, Christians specifically and traditional marriage more generally. Um, and it immediately became not a live and let live movement, but an acceptance movement. I don't have to accept your lifestyle, and you can't force me to do it legally. But that's what has been happening repeatedly since those Supreme Court cases. And so this is where I think she has a point: is that the way the way people seem to think now and the way society has trended, I could absolutely see polyamory. I don't know how you would do this. I can't envision how this would happen if we're talking about polyamory and not polygamy, but I could absolutely see a push for acceptance. Uh,
Well, and with
well, hold on.
polyamory,
Let me
that
finish
is
this.
actually the point, though.
Let me finish this
Yeah.
thought though. It's worse than acceptance though, because uh, what is being forced with the LGBTQAI plus movement is not just acceptance but celebration. Okay, I don't have to accept your lifestyle. I definitely don't have to celebrate it. Okay, whether I agree with it or not is irrelevant. I want to be a grumpy old man. Leave me alone. Just
Okay.
on that level.
Well, that's where I think that you're using the it's gone too far to shut down any conversation. Just like we talked about Simone Biles, again, we'll bring it back to that, keep coming back to that, is it's the treat yourself crowd that's ruining it for everybody. Whereas
Yeah.
for the most part, and in that interview versus what you're talking about is don't judge us versus you have to accept this lifestyle and celebrate it. So it's you're going to the bottom of the slope to shut down any conversation. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't think I was going that far, and I didn't mean to. Well, in the sense that, no, I do want conversation, but I do think that conversation needs to mostly have a negative bent to it, because I think we are talking about things that can have a negative psychological impact or even negative physical impact for a lot of people.
Well, with
So,
you can make a counter argument for the forced monogamy, because let's look at the positive parts of and I don't remember if it was with the Coleman interview or with
mhm,
the Candace interview, but the positive aspects of how she describes polyamory, uh, the honesty. So you're honest with your partner versus cheating behind their back. So the big difference between one of my problems with the conversation is people especially on the conservative side, but just in society in general, call polyamory cheating. It's not.
no.
Cheating implies the lie,
Mhm.
right? So if you're going out and having sex with other individuals in relationships and lying to your life partner about it, you are cheating. But if it is an agreement that this is an okay thing, then it is not cheating. The second positive thing is you're doing something that every psychologist in the world would call a positive thing, and you're setting boundaries. What are the rules within this system that make it not a negative thing? Are you allowed to uh, go have sex with other people, but you're not allowed to have a relationship? Okay, that's an open marriage. There's a boundary set. Are you allowed to actually have a romantic relationship with these people? Now you're talking polyamory. But one of the big things is you set the boundaries. You can't bring them home, or you can't bring them around the kids. Or I was looking up stuff on this, and there's actually checklists out there for this, and it's a yes, no, maybe list. Yes, you're allowed to do this. No, you're not allowed to do this, and maybe depending on the situation. Are you allowed to have unprotected sex? No. Okay. Are you allowed uh, to be seen in public with this person? Yes. Okay. So now you've got this list of things, and you're actually actively communicating with your partner about what you can and can't do in this situation, which is more than most couples do on anything.
Mhm.
Actively communicating with each other. So there's two positives right there that we can take out of this. And actually, if people did those things in their other relationship, maybe we wouldn't even have this discussion. Uh, so there are good and bad to everything, and this is just life in general. So there's good and bad to everything, and we can't have that conversation because it's taboo. Well, now we've just shut down a whole section of the population on this bell curve that has this other tendency, and if you shut it down, they're going to cheat.
Well, again, I'm not saying you should shut it down, but I do think it should be highly negatively skewed because, and here's here's my thoughts on the polyamory idea. Uh, Again, going back to the conversation, the podcast that sparked all this. Um, so first off, the grumpy old man side is that uh, my first thought when I hear people talking about this is the weak wussification of our generation and younger, is we're all a bunch of wussies. What I hear from, and I, granted, this is partly my own personal personality. This is partly my personality, and partly my philosophy, just making me biased this way. But I hear people complaining that relationships are hard. Yeah, they are, but that doesn't mean you say, all right, well, let's go ahead and stretch these boundaries way wide and make it easier. No, you should probably work on it. Again, going back to the Simone Biles example of, kind of my rebuttal to everything you just said there is that, yes, it may have been good. She may have had, from what you said, she probably had some very legitimate mental health reasons to pull out of the competition, that would help her mentally, um, in the short term. But there needed to be that discussion internally and with coaches and teammates, and hopefully it happened of, wait a minute, are you sure that this isn't going to be worse long term? Are you sure you don't want to push yourself through this so that you don't end up regretting it down the line? Is okay. And kind of, what I've been harping on this whole time is, okay, maybe that works for you, Isla, but I really don't think it's going to work for most people. I genuinely, that's kind of my second point, is I genuinely think that a lot of people who try this relatively newfangled, it's not, but the cultural aspect of it is, the online aspect of it is the open marriage and polyamory. I worry that most of these people are going to end up having regrets down the line, and that these extra relationships, rather than making for a healthier, um, core relationship, for lack of a better word, is going to make that more strained. And whatever, and again, I'll also point out, kind of because we're talking about mental health and underlying issues, I would also say that most probably this is coming about from a root problem in that core relationship that needs to be resolved. And this is just going to mask that, if not make it worse.
Yes, no, maybe on all of that. Uh, the this is why this is actually why I think it should be a central, not debate. It should be more openly talked about, because it's you're right in the fact that it's being tried mostly post hoc. So everything's cyclical in human. Nikolai Tesla, interesting person to bring into this conversation, right?
I'm curious where you're going here.
He famously said that if you thought about the world in threes and sixes, everything makes sense. And nobody knew what the fuck he was talking about. And he wasn't alive to explain it. So, but what I think he was getting at personally is that everything in life is cyclical.
Mm-hmm.
And when you think of threes and sixes, those are cyclical numbers. They're repeatable numbers. And when we talk about our hormone profiles, our mating habits, everything is cyclical. And that's what I had all the sources that I couldn't find again earlier when I was trying to get my tabs up, was average time between children, average time between this part of relationship, this part, and actually the brain chemicals that are responsible for those things. And we see these patterns. So if you look at patterns over time, well, the best way to keep a marriage going on a romantic level is to keep having children. Because about every 3 to 4 years, you get in this pattern of, I want to mate, whether it's male or female. And males are a little bit less, but again, it depends on what where you are on that spectrum. So, but if you want to keep a monogamous relationship going, you keep having children. And this is something we saw in the past, right? Ben Franklin had 17 siblings or something along that line. So that was something that was normal back then. But now, like my personal household, we were one and done. We had one child, and now I can't have kids anymore because we took care of that. And you're two, right?
Mhm.
And that's about average, 2.5 kids, right? So everything is cyclical, and we have these cyclical patterns. Where the fuck was I going with this? What was the last thing you said?
The newness of this, that's not really new, of polyamory, and then I think people are embracing it. Basically, what I was trying to say is I think people are embracing this way too quickly
Oh,
without
okay.
thinking it
I know
through.
where I was going now. Okay. So because we have these patterns, but we don't have the same, because we have these hormonal patterns, but we don't have the same outcomes,
Mhm.
kid after kid after kid after kid after kid after kid, it actually opens up a new avenue where you're going to feel this certain thing over and over again. And there's an author, John Bradshaw, and he really works with a lot of addiction stuff, but also relationship issues. And what you see in these basically broken marriages is when someone exits that cycle, but the other partner does not. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
That's where, so say uh, uh, it's usually the male because he's higher testosterone. The male is in that cycle where he's ready. I'm ready to mate again. I'm ready to do all this. And the female's done. Well, what happens in that situation is you end up getting a bitter male, is all you end up getting, because she's done. She either does her wifely duty, which to me is an emotional form of rape, but uh, she ends up doing her wifely duty, or he just gets pissed off and goes somewhere else. Uh, and because we don't have this situation where we're just having kid after kid after kid after kid until you're infertile, we we open up to this. I'm either going to be an angry, bitter individual, or I'm going to go find something somewhere else. And some people resist it, obviously, because again, we're on that bell curve. Some people resist it, but most people are going to be put in that situation where it's going to be a strain on their own internal mental state, which eventually will leak to their relationship uh, dynamic. So we have, again, as we've talked about with fitness, out grown out of our evolution. Does that make sense? So we're designed to be a certain way, but we aren't that way. And I think that at that point, this is where the polyamorous crowd kind of has a very good point, is we have an outlet for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because not everybody's going to be in the same hormonal state at the same time. And so to put that on one person, that's a pretty big ask. And we may have to have the free will discussion, because that hormonal state is part of our lack of free will, if you really think about it.
Yeah, men aren't potatoes. I'll let people try and figure out what that quote comes from. Men aren't potatoes, sir. Um,
But let me close out with one final point, is why I think this should be a bigger discussion topic. Is it would allow for people to have this discussion before they get married. And I think that's an important thing, is that if we had this discussion before we get married, hey, I do have a tendency to have this pattern. Well, I'm not cool with that. Well, guess what? That's just one thing that stopped something bad from happening later on. Whereas
or one thing yeah, bad either. So the relationship ends and you don't get married, or bad in that someone ended up just cheating behind someone's back because we didn't talk about this ahead of time.
Mhm.
So in that sense, I will agree with you that yes, conversation I mean, that's what we were talking about with Simone Biles and mental health. If we're gonna talk about it, then let's fricking talk about it.
Well, yeah, and it should be in a productive manner where I, by the time I'm ready to get married. By the way, you young people, don't get married to the first love. Give it time. I talked about those cyclical patterns.
Mhm.
There's a chemical in your brain. It's called the love cocktail. Uh, it is in trace amounts in chocolate, so that there's your aphrodisiac effect. Uh, and actually, it's being sold as a weight loss drug now because you have a lot of energy, which is why you can go like rabbits in the beginning. Uh, uh, Phenylethylamine, PEA, is a chemical and it barrages your prefrontal cortex, and all of a sudden you can't make good decisions because it's adaptive. If I'm a male in we're going to go back to primates and in our ancestors, is if I'm a male and I want to be the alpha male so I can mate with the female that I just fell in love with, uh, eros, romantic love, right? Uh, it actually benefits me to shut off the part of my brain that makes sense, because now I've got to go take on the other alpha male who's probably bigger and stronger than me. That's why he's the alpha male. And I've got to do it with no uh, mental blocks, right? So that is the drug that takes away all sense making, because we've all had that friend that was with a girl and you're like, why the hell are you with that girl? And they will justify it upside down.
Why do you keep doing stupid things?
Yeah, and the red flags are everywhere. So this lasts in most people from about a year and a half to 2 years. So my advice to all young people out there is give your relationship over that 2 year mark before you get engaged and get married, because otherwise you're playing roulette. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But after that, then okay, I can actually think through this. I see all those red flags that popped up. But where was I going with this?
I don't know, but I feel like we've kind of gone as much as we need to on this particular topic, and I think what you just said there is a good place to leave off and tease that next sexy time with Sam should be relationship advice from grumpy old men. So because I think you've brought up some good points that we could talk relationships more generally rather than the specific uh, um, sexual topics that we were talking about here.
Oh well, but there was patterns.
Mhm.
So get again, don't. This is where again we've outgrown how we were designed because we live so long and we become adults so late right now. Is your pattern by the time you should be committing to somebody. If in the past you were that I have to bounce around, either don't commit to anybody, first of all, or uh, let it be upfront. Say, hey, I need a polyamorous or an open relationship for this to work. I want to die with you, but at the same time, I can't be, I need variety in my life. And you giving yourself that openness to know where you lie on that spectrum, I think would save so many marriages. And actually, we're talking about the children earlier, is if you can get that up front, you're not going to have a lot of these fatherless children because of a bad breakup. And you can be a father to a child without being a 100% monogamous adult, because they're two separate things. My child is different than my relationship with my spouse.
I don't think they are two separate things, but that's a good point to agree to disagree because certainly the end result you're going for is what we certainly both agree on, and society could use more of.
Well, every relationship you have is separate with considerations towards the other. So my relationship to my son is separate from my relationship to my wife, which is separate to my relationship with you, but they all have interplay, obviously. They all affect each other and have strings going every which way, but they are separate. The way I treat my son is not dependent on the last discussion I had with my wife about what we're having for dinner. Does that make sense?
No, it makes sense, but I think you're wrong, because I think the parent-child relationship is different. And I think it doesn't take a village. That's stupid. It takes two complementary people, a mother and a father.
Mhm.
And I think that complementarianism is what makes that a bonded relationship between
I will
the
say it
three
takes
of you.
a masculine and feminine, but that, because I've seen couples where the male was the female and the
Yeah,
female was the male, but
yeah. All right. Well, I think we've bludgeoned that deceased equine plenty, and now we can move on to getting ourselves banned.
all right. So we're going to do that on a separate
Yes.
recording because it may get us banned. We'll be right back. Let me get a refill.